Good afternoon, Mr. Aspeling.
Good afternoon to one and all.
Yes. You must be familiar now with the process. Advocate Nile is going to do your swearing in, and Mr. Tom will then take you through the paces. Advocate Nile.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Mr. Aspeling.
Afternoon from me, sir.
Will you be taking an oath or will you affirm?
I'll be taking an oath, thank you.
No problem. Mr. Russel Aspeling, do you swear that the evidence you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me, Dad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aspeling. You've now been sworn in as a participant in the SJN hearings.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Tom.
Hi, Mr. Aspeling.
Yes, Mr. Tom.
Yes, we've met before.
Yes, sir.
At least you are familiar with my voice and I'm familiar with yours as well. Now, you've prepared a submission. Which submission you've indicate you're gonna be speaking to during your testimony under oath. So as such, this submission that you've prepared will transform to a document which has been made under oath. Now, in your submission, you have 5 chapters or 5 topics that you will be talking to this afternoon. And the first topic is back to my grounding in cricket. The second topic or chapter is the gratefully disillusioned, open bracket, illusions to be thankfully dissed, closed bracket. The third concept chapter, you will be talking about the concept, the rainbow concept, a pot of gold pathway, the way of losers. The fourth chapter, you will be talking about what you term relational inequities, soft skills revolution, misplaced or devalued commodities, e.g. beliefs, attitudes, behavioral outcomes. The fifth chapter, you will be talking about in-out, head-heart transformation. The sixth chapter, you will be talking about in full view, spirited cricket to be engaged to CSA with suggested full-time auto, which is the Office of the Transformation Ombudsman, funded by Transformation 2.0. Now, that is the structure of your submission. And of course, you've also prepared slides, which I believe, time permitting, you will be taking the chairperson through those slides in trying to demonstrate or illustrate the point or the message you seek to drive home. The platform is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Aspeling.
Let me start by saying I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to be heard. These are hearings, so not often in cricket spaces, because of the discrimination and the mandate that we face today, do we actually have a chance to get heard. And I think we take that for granted. People are devalued on the basis of not getting given a voice. So let me give you, all the accolades for this type of occasion.
Yes.
So let me start off with a disclaimer, because I'm speaking to legal counsel here, so a disclaimer of some sorts. My disclaimer up front there, firstly, let me give you the title. It's the soulfulness of the CSA. The soullessness, sorry.
Yeah.
The soullessness of the CSA.
Yeah.
That is my topic today, and what I would like to unpack in those 6 points that you mentioned earlier. So the disclaimer goes as follows. This is from my first-hand observations, and these are in no way judgments. So therefore, I'm wanting to try and give a context and perhaps reason as to why a lot of the discriminations that are undisputed within the spaces, the allegations that people have been making, why these things are constantly unfolding. And these are based on my first-hand encounters in the spaces. So one of the first premises then, I don't want to glance over that statement. A lot of people tend to think when you make strong statements, you are judging them. I'm not judging, I'm observing. And therefore, no one needs to get defensive about anything. It is an opportunity for someone to air their experiences so that one can get to a place of maturity by unpacking, introspectively what is being shared. So these are observations and not judgments. And so therefore, my number one premise is such. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And that's from a Chinese proverb. So what I'm hoping to do here is to turn or light the candle to some sort and cast some light as to why things have been occurred, some moments of darkness that occurred in the past. I'll also obviously mention some dark moments because that's what this hearing is all about. But I would also like to show a light towards a brighter future. Now, I find it quite ironic that I had to follow on from Mr. Manik earlier because I felt like we actually might be a very good batting pair here today. I was standing on the non-striker's end and I was actually applauding his efforts there. So my submission actually flows nicely into his in a sense, and I will look at the historical past. But before I go there, I have skipped the second premise. I'll bring that up later. So if you're following the document, I would go to my first point of my background because I'm not very well known publicly in terms of cricket spaces, but I've been operating in cricket spaces since 2006. So I'll start with the document and go through it quite, almost verbatim in a way so that I can get to the nuts and bolts or the ins and outs of what I want to share, if you don't mind. Yeah?
No.
So, thank you. So cricket has always been part of my family upbringing. It was forever on the TV screens, and I can actually fondly remember really being captivated by the game by the 92 World Cup. Particularly, I think it was a Sunday, we were at church in a sense, and Jonty Rhodes ran out in Zamalulak. So we rushed back to try and see that. We actually left the church service to come and see the highlights of that sort of experience. So cricket has always been part of it, but for some other reason, I didn't participate. And for the large part, I understood, looking back, that there was actually, in fact, some serious regret or bitterness that came with the way of my father's association to sport. So there was some sort of a subtle, reluctance to try and include me in the game. Now, I didn't understand any of that through the time being. So a lot of my father's obviously played soccer, hockey, and obviously provincial cricket. He represented EP under the banner of SACOS back in the day. So that is my upbringing or my experience in the game. Now, again, whenever there's a game of cricket on television, my family, including my mom, which is a surreal scenario, she never watched any game live necessarily, but when it's on television, she would tell you the score updates and so forth. So it was part of our makeup, part of the fabric of what we were as a family. Yes. I'm the eldest of three. I've got a younger brother, 7 years younger than me, and then also a sister. My sister came 10 years later, so she was the one that possibly didn't actually have a cricket sort of feel to things, being younger. So when I used to recall one fond memory, so I don't recall anything of my father playing the other codes, hockey and soccer, but I remember one or two incidences having actually joined my father around the boundary of a cricket field, which is quite surreal to think that the only remembrance I have of the sport with my dad was actually at United Cricket Club, running around the game. He was playing for United Cricket Club with Gerald Majola and the likes, Kai Majola and so forth. I think Danny Jordan also played in that team. So I was playing under the stadium, and for some other reason, that's my memory, getting up to mischief on the side there. So, yes. That's my upbringing from the game. And then my SACCOS upbringing, my grandfather was a primary school secretary, and SACCOS was a big part of our upbringing. I also played trials under SACCOS, but the year that I played, this was high school, obviously, I actually got selected as an EP, for EP cricket eventually, but that was the very year that SACCOS actually fell apart, so to speak. So this is, I think, 95, if my memory serves me correctly. No, 94, my matric year. So, yeah, part of the reason why I played this late was also because I was a strong academic. I was, pretty much top of my class, and my mom and dad pretty much pushed me academically more than sporting-wise. Okay. But for some of the reason, the love for sport came through, and eventually I landed up going to university, registering for a course, BCom HMS, so that's sport management / sports science. So part of the course, you can stop me, I know, Mr. Chair, you want to write notes and so forth, but I just want to get the background out of the way. But yeah, part of the course was a major in cricket specialization. So, and that course then afforded me an opportunity to be introduced to the club, the UPE Cricket Club back then. And I became first team captain. And I also then got roped in, if you want to call it that, as a team manager for the on-tour club champs. I did this for 4 years, 3 successively, and then another stint later. So 4 years in entirety with UPE senior team, the Premier League team. This is very fond memories for myself, and it basically informed my future, my aspirations to get involved in the game somewhat. I built a lot of good relationships during that time, and a lot of my passions for the game was really reignited and realized. So in 2006, I was full-time appointed, in a very odd way. I got appointed as the video performance analyst at the Warriors in 2006. This was at the full-time employment basis. This was one of, and I mentioned it in my statement, it's one of 3 appointments, if I'm correct. There were obviously 6 franchises around the country. There were only 3 appointed for that year, if I recall correctly. I speak under correction. And I was one of the first to be appointed. Obviously, being a pioneering or groundbreaking initiative, there's nowhere where you can get mentored, or you really need to, you get thrown in the deep end. So this type of environment was one where I was tasked to learn fast and learn on my own type of thing. And I'm very proud of the fact that I actually managed to be, I perfected the job in a sense, and I excelled and got recognized, amongst my peers. I got recognized to be representing the emerging tours to Australia, as well as some SAA tours. One was to Bangladesh. And obviously, in that particular tour, I think it was in 2010, I also was tasked to be a standing team manager. Now, on that particular tour, and this was a Tri-Nation series, on that tour, Shafiq Abrams was the actual team manager when we started the tour, but needed to go back to South Africa, and I was asked to take over his duties. And I looked after the one-day part of that series. And a lot of the things that I've done there during that time really inspired me to think that I could offer value to the team and to a context of a team environment in such a way that we could actually, enhance performances. Now, these behind-the-scenes type of administrative roles is very much seen maybe just administratively or operationally, but there are a lot of nuances that happens inside team spaces, in particularly in the culture of the team spirit, and all those sorts of things. And that's where these passions arose during that time. We won the series against a formidable West Indian team, and we brought the cup home, so to speak, and I was elated. On the flight back, that's when my spark of enthusiasm arose for trying to help South Africa win a World Cup. Yes. And to that extent, I communicated that back to my CEO, that I have aspirations to be a manager, alongside my video analysis role. And my path I was hoping to open up, in that direction.
Now, Russel.
Sorry,
Russel. Yeah, I just want you, I hope that I'm not rushing you, but you mentioned something interesting in page 2 of your submission. I think it's paragraph 4, where in which you are saying that by 2017, I consulted with the Cobras as a facilitator for their pre-season camp as a team building exercise. I was then appointed as culture catalyst consultant. Now, can you take us through what does that mean? What is it that you were doing as a culture catalyst?
Okay, I would explain that straight away let me just finish this part about the video analysis. So,
okay.
And I'll get into that straight away if you don't mind. So as a video analyst, we would do a lot of preview of strengths and weakness, SWOT analysis of opposition, and we would sit down and do all sorts of things in terms of planning strategies of how to overcombat our opposition, right? Also, part of the role would be, I'm talking about video analysis now, part of the role would be also the technique correction of our own players, if there were to be any correction needed and coaching to be done. But whilst doing the video analysis, which was capturing the games ball by ball, that allowed me to watch the game intensely. And when players used to fail, they used to come off the field and they used to join me to either come and look at their dismissal, or if we were obviously, if we were batting, some of the bowlers come and look at their bowling spells and look where they failed and look where they've struggled. If particularly they join and look not when they're successful, but when they've struggled. So that feedback, that visual feedback was useful for them in terms of trying to improve almost instantaneously, because the game might be a 4-day game and they need to do it as part of the next part of the game. So during that time, this is what happened was, a lot of the players used to confide in me in terms of their vulnerabilities. They started feeling, very fragile because of their failures, and they used to share these things. Now, these are across color lines. There's black, colored, and white, Indian, Muslim, doesn't matter, And they used to confide in me, and I was regarded as possibly a safe space because I used to, for most part, keep things confidential, right? Respecting the relational equity that I was building up with individuals. And during that period of time, I started seeing that these guys needed an ear whilst trying to perform at the optimal, because remember, they're contracted to perform and the pressures were immense, particularly the higher up they go. So those type of conversations help make them feel a little bit more at ease, safer, and equipped to go back out there, and confide into the battleground type of thing. And particularly, you need to understand, though, in terms of discrimination and those sorts of things, a lot of not just on the field stuff, as in terms of what I need to contend with. I'm facing a Dale Steyn now, or I need to face against the swing bowling or the spinner. It's not those things I'm talking about. A lot of it is also, I feel like I'm being victimized. These type of decisions are going against me. Those sorts of scenarios, all the discriminatory experiences that players might be experiencing, they would share those as well with me. Now, because it's almost like a counseling environment, I would be able to one-on-one share my sort of encouragement with them. And I think Usain Manik even spoke about it earlier. There's almost an instantaneous healing that happens when someone hears what you have to say, and they can actually feel heard, and they feel like partially counsel and encourage and inspire to take the next step, right? So those are some of the things that led towards a culture catalyst type of role. So my video analysis actually informed my culture catalyst direction. Okay, so to answer your question, I hope I'm leading towards you answering your question. A culture catalyst ultimately suggests that every team has a culture. It's inherent within every team. Culture can be defined in different ways, but one of the unique ways is simply, it's a way of thinking and a way of behaving. It's the way the team thinks and the way the team behaves. It's the accepted way of doing things, and ultimately leads into the team spirit, what they're all about, right? Now, every team has one, but you can actually direct it in a certain direction. I make mention of a quote later in the thing, but I'll say it here now. There's this philosophy from John Maxwell where it says, everything rises and falls on leadership, right? So the leader will come into the space and the leader will be able to determine certain aspects of who he is, what he stands for, and you'll bring that to the equation. Now, I'm not just talking about captain, coach, and those sorts of leaders, because I consider everyone to be leaders. We're all leaders in our own rights. If we are fathers and mothers and so forth, that's a form of leadership. So we all have leadership capabilities. So what we are talking about is everyone brings to this melting pot an aspect that basically speaks to that culture. So collectively, team culture needs to be looked at or catalyzed in a performance environment. And that's what Culture Catalyst was all about. It's trying to unpack some of these soft skills as the result of what happens behind the scenes.
Yes.
What we would refer to as the gees of the team spirit, those sorts of dynamics. I hope I answered your question there.
Yes.
I'll try and get into that as well when I get closer to it again. All right. So I said it there. This safe space was for the players to share their vulnerabilities, and basically it was fast-tracking their performances, right? Yes. It really became an environment of, within an environment of lack of trust or distrust for most part, there was a lot of trust that was being created inside that space. And it was very much informal, and it needed to be informal because anything hierarchical has in and of itself its own barriers. If I know you're my boss, or I know I need to surrender to you, I'm not going to say everything I need to say because of fear of either victimization or you're going to take it in the wrong way, and therefore it will have a negative effect on how how the repercussions might be. So all we basically did was to help transition players into the next versions of themselves and expressions of themselves. And that was on-field as well as off-field, because we would discuss off-field things that happen in their lives and stuff like that. And that would help because they would reflect back in a safe space and help, get them ready for the next battle. Now, Ashwell mentioned things earlier about how we felt unwelcomed and not belonging to teams like that. Ashwell was part of the Warriors for an extended stint, and part of our dealings would have been exactly that. As a player, he was there and he would have felt the same sort of oppressive experiences, and you would have shared those sorts of scenarios because we're talking about systemic discrimination, right? So we would be speaking about those things all the time, and we would try and either dispel the issue offhand, or we would try and find resolution as best as we can, lead from where we are and make those sorts of changes. So what you're referring to 2017 there was actually a stint that I did under head coach Ashwell Prince. So because we did it as players, he pulled me in as a catalyst, as a culture catalyst under his team at the Cobras. And that's what informed a lot of that sort of appointee, right? I firmly believe cricket has actually gone, having been a video analyst for 6 years, cricket's focus is actually it's misaligned to some extent, in that they remember a video analyst role was a pioneering role. Teams back in the day didn't have a fitness trainer, they didn't have a biokineticist, they didn't have a physio. I'm talking about when we started professionally, and they didn't have video analysts. They didn't have these roles. And I felt like there was always going to need to be an evolution on what's required within professional team structures. Now, part of what my journey has suggested was that a focus on a culture catalyst is needed within team, any professional team. If you look at someone like the Black Caps, for instance, the New Zealand Black Caps, they imbibe such a strong team spirit that you cannot not get to that point of understanding of what you're all about unless there's a solid identity and a strong focus on culture. You have to have that. In actual fact, if you're not aware, Cricket South Africa actually employed a New Zealander who spoke directly into culture. His name is Owen Eastwood, that's his name is. So he was consulting with the Proteas at the stage. So, and hence, what you're asking about culture catalyst, the value add of that is actual fact embedded within what is loosely known as Protea Fire. Protea Fire speaks to exactly that, the culture of the team, what they're all about, what's the inner makings and the workings of what they're all about. Now, it obviously looks like Protea Fire is a misfire because all these allegations are coming to the fore. where they're talking about unity and playing for each other and all those sorts of things. It seems like lip service. It is in actual fact a strange fire because culture wasn't inherently sincere. And this is why I felt as a moving into a culture space, the only way to move cricket forward professionally in a very, in a performance manner, as well as an inclusive manner, you need to look at culture. Culture needs to be a focus, okay? And part of what makes up culture is transformation. It's a huge component of it, but I'll get to that later, if you don't mind, okay? So what I want to point out also is a lot of these genuineness, the genuine relations that I built up with these players, I built a decent rapport with them. It was a matter of sincerity and deep connections. And as a result of it, I was always included into like wedding occasions, invites and social gatherings and celebratory, occasions. So these things were sincere, and as a result of it, these are the things that we're looking for. We need to have trusted relationships within cricket, and this has been basically a no-go at the moment. A lot of people are very distrusting of one another, and I'm going to explain why, okay? I just want to get past this background. So as you said there, I took a break from the game. If you look at the document, I took a break from the game when I resigned in 2012. I need to mention this, though, before I move any further. I increased my serving capacity, which also included informal skills offerings, which was life coaching, performance coaching, SACA mentoring, I did that, as well as leadership training with players. These are all informal and ad hoc, a part of my video analysis role. It wasn't at all recognized by the Warriors. It was just kind of tolerated or permitted in a way, right? I was eventually acknowledged as team manager. I put acknowledged in inverted commas there because I was announced to the team by the head coach, which was Pete Botha at the time, but I wasn't actually acknowledged as such formally by the CEO and the institution in and of itself. That in and of itself was the reason for my resignation, right? So my final year was 2012.
So when you say you were not recognized, was that just a title that you had without any significance?
Sorry, sir, you broke up there. I didn't hear you. What the title?
No, I was saying you were not acknowledged. What do you mean by that? Was it just a title that you were team manager?
Yeah, so I was tasked with the role of being a team manager, officially announced as such, but I wasn't actually acknowledged by the CEO and the structures. So the head coach went and declared that to the team. I started my duties as a team manager, but as a consequence, I wasn't actually empowered to do the role. So one of the things, for instance, and bad feeling about. One of the things that happened was a manager normally handles a kitty. You have a budget and you take money on tour and handles it and you get meal allowances. You have to hand out these sorts of things. You'd call it social events, a team building or team meetings, as well as maybe an outing, team building outing, a night out sort of scenario. And I wasn't empowered enough to do that. So the head coach kept the monies and didn't empower me to do it. So I had to literally go to him to say, listen, we need to go buy supplies for the physio. They need new tape or whatever. And I would have to try and shoot off and try and go get the tape, or someone else would go, but I wasn't allowed to carry the purse, so to speak, So, and there was also an occasion where it's kind of a big sort of discriminatory case. There was an issue in the change room during one game where they ran out of sweets. So the guys tend to get these sugar sweets when they get the tea breaks, just to keep energies high and so forth. And because there were other players that were training for a next competition, they came in and basically used all of it. Now, it was an incident. In actual fact, I'll make mention of the name. Makai Ntini was the one of the victims here of my, call it wrath, if you want to call it that. But what happened was like I said, the team exhausted the resources which was made available. So I sent out for additional supply, and I used my own money, not money from the team budget, my own money. And I did it quietly, and I brought this in time for the tea break. And unfortunately, I was doing coding, I was doing video analysis as well as team manager. So this whole big packet of sweets was laying on the desk a bit away from me. And it just so happened that Makaya was dipping into the packet, which is, I mean, there's no fault of his own. He didn't know where this was coming from. He thought it was supplied for the team, you know, and for everyone that's there. And he took it, and I just politely went over to him, and I said to him, "Listen, Mackie, this is actually for the team because the rest of the supply is actually gone. So can you maybe, you know, be very prudent of what you're doing there, you know?" As I done that, and I sorted out straight away with him. He was happy and courteous towards what I was doing. David Jacobs then got involved, which was the one-day, call it captain, and he was, I think, was injured or he was preparing for the one-day stuff. David Jacobs then started making a big issue of this. So as a result of it, he escalated this thing, and he went to go and bring the CEO into this. In retrospect, I think it was a ploy to try and darken me or to try and get me out of the equation from a team management point of view. And it escalated instantaneously. And it was, how do you treat a legend like Makaya, telling him not to take these sorts of things? And I said, listen, these are about human relations, it's about respect for other people. There are people doing battle out there, and you guys are literally still not involved in this particular game, and you're using the resources that they need to be using. And I'm managing these resources, so you can't disrespect what I need to do, you know? So therefore, Dave Emsley and you know, that was an incident that sort of escalated as a result of those sorts of things. So when I talk about not being recognized, it was, I'll give you the sort of token title of team manager, but I don't actually value or see you that way. You can just sort of park, don't make too much of a noise, and don't try and be too much of a disruption. Just do the role, you know, I call it in a way, the mundane work, the skivvy work, you know, the runaround goodies, you know what I mean? That sort of dynamic. So I couldn't get the executive part of the role, but I could get the functional, operational side of it. I don't know if that makes sense. Can I go forth?
Yes.
Yes.
So there was, and by the time I left in 2012, I was extremely disillusioned. I used the phrase intentionally there because I felt at that point in time, my 6 years within the system, I coined that phrase there. I saw it was the system of captured snollygasters. And that was inherent within the entire structures. Now, what I mean by that is that essentially I started noticing that people were very much self-serving. It was a space of self-interest and a space of people's, you know, i.e. gravy traders. They were looking to get onto the gravy train and ride it as best as they possibly can, right? And I was completely disillusioned by this. I didn't see any servant-heartedness for most part, and I didn't see any sacrifices that was done, particularly on the personal front of things. Now, when I talk about this, I'm talking about people positioning themselves systemically because it's part of what I believe the structures as beastly become, you know, and I think that is what informs what's happening now with the discrimination, and hopefully I can actually explain it well when I get to the second part. I just one of my confidants actually sent me this quote, and it speaks directly to that phrase. And he said this of the system. He says, you cannot affect change inside the belly of the beast, because once you're inside the belly of the beast, it means that the beast has consumed you and you have become a part of its system of nutrition. Now, when I reflected on that, I realized that being inside the system, there was no ways I could make a change. I needed to go outside of it, and that's why I resigned. And I started looking at my services as a video analyst, and I knew that I've outgrown it. I was underemployed at that point in time. I've outgrown the title in a sense. And if I stayed on, I would basically be doing the team a disservice because I wouldn't be giving my full-hearted efforts. I felt like someone else could do a better job. So out of principle, I decided to go the way of resigning and allowing someone else to come to the fore. Now, that just opened up an opportunity because they wanted me out anyway, in a sense. So for different reasons. So my recollection of this beast I call is that everyone within the system is either complicit to basically become beastly themselves and be self-seeking. And I felt like cricket would have its reckoning day. And I believe this is, call it holy ground. The SJN process is almost holy ground for us to do a reset, because we cannot keep going the way of self-interest. There's no ways we can sustain that. We have to get back to the days of servant leadership, of servant-hearted approach, of sacrificing. And that's the history and historical background where we mostly came from. Most of us have come from. So these are type of things that needed to be changed, intruded and intervened. I use the example, I don't think I need to make mention of the example, but it's a Gandhi example where essentially he speaks about be the change you want to see in the world. And I felt like out of principle, I can't ask people to be selfless if I wasn't willing to be selfless myself. So that's why I resigned as a video analyst. At that point in time, I then left cricket entirely. I took a sabbatical from it, and I focused on leadership training, facilitation with John C. Maxwell, and I did work as a facilitator during that stint. By 2000, after I saw the 2015 World Cup, I noticed that cricket has still not been transformed after that 4-year period, and I felt like I could still make a difference somehow, and I registered a company called Spirit Cricket, and that's when I launched it. So by 2017, as you rightly pointed out there, I became a facilitator with the Cobras in the pre-season. And then I got roped in as a full-time culture catalyst in the 2017-2018 season. Now, when you start putting money and attention towards something that you find important, you're now escalating it. Anytime you put your treasure and your focus on something, you make it bigger. It's like anything. If you look in this room now, I'm facing the chairperson. All I'm going to see is the chairperson. I'm making him bigger, but I'm excluding everyone else. Now, that's the point is when you have someone in a role, you're escalating that to a space of importance. So when we did that with the Cobras in the 2017-2018 season, it straight away yielded the results because we were now focusing on things that have never been focused on intensely before. We started focusing on the soft skills, right? And we instantly yielded the results. And I call it a result. Number one, we became runners-up with a very young team, an extremely young team, in their first years of contracting. We became runners-up to the Super Sport series. Now, Super Sport is a 4-day competition, which is the toughest one it's the prize competition in cricket. It's the one you want to win, right? It's the real cricket, if you want to call it that, okay? And we became runners-up. We got tipped on the last day. I would imagine almost the last hour, even if it landed up being the last few overs of the competition, that the Lions won us, right? It was heart-wrenching and heartbreaking to go through that experience because we thought we could do a miracle and actually win it in our first year. Now, the second benefit from having focused on a culture focus was that we eventually allowed a lot of players to actually reach their fuller potential by being recognized to be Proteas. Case in point, Calvin Rain, Zubair Hamza, there are tons of them, George Linde, there are a few of them. A lot of them have come through the system, Janeman Milan, Peter Milan, all of these guys have come from that space and have actually graduated. So that is also some of the things that we can tick off in terms of a job well done. We might have not won the silverware, but we had produced Proteas because that's the mandate that franchises have, right? Then I also then got appointed with the Cape Town Blitz. Now, Cape Town Blitz was unique as well. In the Cape Town Blitz is the international team with international players. And we also focus on culture. And that also rendered fruits, right? Sorry, I just need to double check what time allocation, because I wasn't told earlier.
Didn't I tell you? We started around about 13:43. We should be done by 15:30, but I will make an allowance of the time that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
15:30, 15:45.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as a result of the Cape Town Blitz, again, international team that were in those teams, so it's a different feel to it. So because we focus on culture, there was a lot of behind the scenes work, a lot of one-on-one type of conversation where you're basically instilling faith and support and enhancing guys' confidence, essentially, you know. Now, one will describe these things to the coach normally. However, the coach's job is actually to do cricket things, and is a recognized superior. And players don't tend to feel safe with coaches, right? So when you have someone who's ad hoc, who's an additional member, who doesn't have any say and leeway in terms of, selections and so forth, it's actually something that enhances the confidence and the capability of a player. So this is what happened with the Cape Town Blitz. Also, first year, runners up in terms of that MSL competition. We landed up going straight to the final and runners up. We won a winning streak. So this is also with players coming in and players leaving in and out, because there was a lot of changes within the makeup. So that is a proud call it a feather in our cap in a sense regarding culture and catalyst of culture, okay? Then Paul Rocks was the next year, 2019. These are all three different teams, right? And three different makeups. Paul Rocks was, again, a fresh experience, brand new for me. I've never been exposed to that environment before. And Paul Rocks was a hugely magical experience in terms of catalyst again. I played a lot of behind the scenes work there, and I'm saying it as humbly as I possibly can, but I need to say it. That culture was a driving factor there. Now, in my view, you won't necessarily get the acknowledgement for a lot of different reasons from the powers that be, because I had to put out a lot of fires, because the work that I tend to do is work of trying to preventative measures, trying to get things from not being a problem. So you needed to do subtle work without necessarily being noticed that you're actually being the one driving it, right? And that's what I refer to. If you look at my next part here, I talk about my FE approach. For those of you who are scientists in the room, my FE approach is something that institutional controls, institutional type of structures will not recommend, okay? They'll actually, in fact, go the exact opposite. And FE, for those of you who don't know, is actually iron, okay? And I use iron there in particular. So iron is a catalyst. And I use the example of not actually, when you take hydrogen and nitrogen, I'm just using this to illustrate the point here, guys, if you don't mind, as a metaphor. If you take hydrogen and nitrogen, you put it in a cylinder and you leave it aside, nothing will happen to those components because they don't speak to each other. But as soon as you add iron into the equation, you leave it overnight, it will bond, it will merge, right? And it will turn into ammonia. Okay, I know it's not a science lesson here, but ammonia is actually a cleaning product and it's a fertilizer, so it can create more things, right? So with iron there, inside ammonia, this is a real thing. Inside ammonia, there is absolutely no trace of iron. Iron's role was only to catalyze hydrogen and nitrogen. So my role or my job as a catalyst is to make sure that I have no traces of myself as a catalyst inside a change, as a change agent. So if I want to say it differently, I don't want to get my fingerprints on any forms of change. I want to leave no evidence that I actually affected the change. And that's how I approach my work as a catalyst. I make you believe that your choices have allowed you to get to where you get to. Now, cricket spaces don't do that. They like to take the glory for themselves, and they like to promote themselves based on that glory. And that is a fault, I believe, in our systemic approach. It's what creates beastly type of experiences. As the good book says, pride goes before the fall. And I tend to think that this is what we tend to do with ourselves. We set ourselves up for falling. So institutional structures right now are very egotistical and very, lean towards that sort of self-promoting, self-glory type of postures. So in my whole journey within cricket, what I've discovered, and I just want to say it and leave it, okay, is that I had two distinctive gifts that came out to the fore. Number one was a visionary. So visionary meant was I had the capacity to see how things could lead to the future, and I could see things early, and I could see things before everyone else could see it. And because of that, it obviously created a lot of fortune for me. I had the privilege of having that capabilities, but it also created a lot of frustration because I was still stuck in the present. I could envision the future, but no one was there with me. So I was stuck with dealing with the present, and I was stuck with dealing with a crowd of people that liked the present. They liked the status quo, and they resisted those changes that I was proposing. But I could also see that certain action today was not going to allow us to get to the future we promised to have. So I think, Mr. Chairperson, I think you phrased it so nicely once about how the past informs the present and how our present can possibly lead to our future. Now, I am of the opinion that our past, our present, and our future all happen simultaneously. We are the sum total right now. What we're doing is the present unfolding because of where we are. SJN is the result of the BML. And as a result, whatever we're doing now, we're creating a future for ourselves. Everything is happening simultaneously. So as a result of it, if you do not take into account a foresightful, a visionary approach to things, you are not necessarily going to hit your target. You are only imagining the present as the present only matters, but you have to take into foresight what it could be like. And this is why you guys are tasked to say, let's look at the past and the discrimination and the issues, and let's see what we can do about it now so we can make better decisions and changes that we can create this better future. Everything is happening instantaneously, and I applaud you for your work. But that creates frustration. So the other aspect of my strength sets, which is inherent within me, is a change agent, a catalyst, i.e. that iron component. That is something that is a strong skill set of mine. And because I have these two distinctive strengths, in everything I attempt to do, I would always bring these to the fore. And cricket spaces, the soullessness of the CSA, particularly don't like those type of aspects. They do not necessarily want to be told what to do and how to go about doing it, and neither do they want to change. Yet, change in and of itself in life is inevitable. One thing is guaranteed, and that is change. And this is why we are sitting now at the falling out scenario where we are forced to change.
Isn't it true, though, that change is unsettling, and that's probably why it might be raised as a reason for people not wanting change, because we become comfortable in what is called comfort zones, and anything that seeks to change the status quo is not really welcome because it's unsettling.
Yes, 100%. And from your statement there, Mr. Chair, I was going to get into it later, but I'll go with it now. Because it's unsettling, what that actually tells us is that people prefer not to be unsettled. So people prefer the comfort zone and therefore do not like to be challenged. And I tell you now, your statement there is actual fact the reason why we don't win a World Cup. It's because we don't like to be challenged. When we are put under scoreboard pressure, we loosely choke. We become so intensely under pressure that we do not have the character and the wherewithal to actually go towards something that's uncomfortable. I'll use an example of the very Ashford Prince being hailed for this type of an experience. I personally do hail him for this. He used to have the philosophy of his preparation. And he said it to you in so many words that he was in a war and righteousness, if you want to call it that, of his people, right? Fighting for a particular cause. But he used to be of the firm opinion that he needs to be challenged, and he loves challenges. And we are very good mates, so I don't mind speaking about him in the third person. He can challenge me on it directly. So, but he used to do this. When we used to go to matches, and this is my first hand encounter of what he said, we used to go and prepare at the Durban field in Kingsmead, and used to go into the net and actually say to the bowler or someone who's throwing the ball at him in preparation, "Mark my seer, please hurt me," because the bouncier wickets of the Kingsmead would be tough to face. So he would say, as preparation for the battle out the next day or 2 days later, he needs to be able to confront it in preparation mode. He needs to be comfortable with challenge. And the system does not like challenge. So when you bring a catalyst or a change agent to the spaces, they label you as a troublemaker, and therefore they need to get rid of you for whatever reason, but just for the fact that you're making them uncomfortable. But that is why we would not go to another level of success, as a World Cup winners, because for the most part, when we are dominating performances, it is on the basis of we already at places of strength. Ashwell Printer's career was built on 20 for 3 and then he walks to the wicket, and now I need to fight for my team. Hussein Manek just mentioned it earlier. Temba Bavuma plays better when the team is in trouble. It's the same sort of character that needs to be shown. And that's what the missing element, that's a soft skill that's essential to ultimate performances. And we are not even recognizing it as a flaw or as a missing gap in our game. Because tendency is to just make it comfortable. We are snollybusters. We are shrewd and unprincipled, and we want it easier. We want to cash in on a salary that we do the least amount of effort for. And I'm saying this a bit harshly, but I'm saying it from a loving space. Because we do not know that we are imprisoned by our own self-interest. And this is everyone across the board. Because I need to say this, everyone is complicit. Everyone. This is a beastly system. Even if you are non-white, we used to have this colored phrase. I don't know if it's prominent in black circles. I have a lot of black friends. I even have members, part of my company, that are very close friends. But they used to have this saying in the colored spaces, and it's quite derogatory. And you, in actual fact, I have to judge myself for this, hold myself accountable, lay a case against myself for racism when I do this, or if I were to do this, okay? It is simply this: we regard ourselves, or we say this, you are keeping yourself white. Yeah, hoeveel wit. Now, what does that imply? That implies that white is right and white has particularly has the answers. And we want to be like that. But essentially, we've surrendered to whiteness as rightness when we do that. And we've become part of the beastly system. Now, I'm making very much general statements. But essentially what I'm saying is you have to judge a tree by its fruit. And for the most part, we've been going down these type of directions. It's not all whites. It is those who have surrendered to a lack of soulful expression within the way they deal with things. Right? So I don't know if I'm making sense, but everyone in the system.
Yeah, no.
We spoke earlier, I think you made reference to, I think it was Viv Richards that originally coined that phrase about honorary white, in a sense. That was said from the establishment to Viv Richards to try and persuade him to come here. But I think I know this, a lot of the people inside cricket spaces actually regard themselves as honorary white, and they carry themselves that way.
How do you get to that conclusion, Mr. Russel Aspeling? How do you get to that conclusion?
Because they've adopted certain mindsets of old, which are falling short. They are falling short of what is principally correct. I'll get into the nuts and bolts of it. But essentially, they carry themselves on what is being informed from what is whiteness. Because remember, the union that happened before, and I'll get into this, I'll unpack this and maybe explain myself better if you don't mind. But a lot of them carry themselves in the same fashion. And I don't have anything against color, because I've come from the Sackler's background of non-racialism. But for the sake of your mandate here, I need to point it out. Right? I've had an instance, had a scenario where a player told me, you know, I can't believe how much value added to from your type of people. As if to assume your people cannot do this. How can your people inform me of what to do next? How can you be wiser than my own people? This is a white player saying this to me. That was derogatory and patronizing, but we tend to adopt that sort of thinking ourselves when we make statements like, yeah, hoe veel wit, because we tend to carry ourselves like white people. So therefore, the Black conscious movement was in a position of things like that. And I know I'm talking political jargon here, but there is a sense of something deeper, something humanely deeper than just our color. But for the sake of this particular hearing, I need to point those type of things out. It's like, what I'm trying to say is I'm incriminating myself because Roman Israel, you know the movie Roman J. Israel Esquire, we built a case against himself. He's saying, I actually have prejudice myself, and I tend to think biasly about certain things. So I just want to make that point that people in the system, even though they might have a fair complexion, a dark complexion, sorry, they often think of themselves in a whiteness type of mentality. And white is not necessarily right. We have to go deeper than that. And that's where we are superficially missing the boat. I'll get into that now in the next part. This is the illusions that I'm trying to diss in the next part.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the second one is gratefully disillusioned. The reason why I labeled it that is I believe that a lot of people have been listening to these type of experiences, feeling very privileged and honored to think of our national team in a particular way, and hearing these sad stories and heart-wrenching stories, they become completely disillusioned like I once was. For someone like myself who's inside the system and have first-hand experience of these encounters, it's not shocking, not at all. It's actual fact expected because it's ongoing reality and people are living this thing day to day and sharing these things with you. So the sad part of this whole thing is that we now need to re-look at what we thought was always an honorable space and realize it's always been dishonorable, and now I have to choose a better way forward. Yes. So I'll look at my second premise, if I can just quickly go back to it. The premise of what I'm about to discuss is based on this. The problem isn't a shortage of opportunities. It's a lack of perspective. That's from Tim Fargo. So the problem we face with today, which is racial discrimination, inequality, unfairness to women, to race groups, it isn't a shortage of opportunities. It isn't a shortage of facilities. All these things that was dispelled, I'm not making light of it. But when we address the lack of perspective, those other things get resolved much easier. It is perspectives that are driving the way we are dealing with what seemingly are challenges. So that's the premise in which I'm...
Oh, okay. No, continue.
So let me start with, in 1991, this is the great disillusion component now. In 1991 was the Freedom Series when we came from isolation. Now we were separated and we were fighting for freedom for reasons that Mr. Manik nicely pointed out there. We essentially had certain concessions, and part of that was from CODESA and so forth. And there was, in good faith, a unification that the old SACOS members have conceded to for the sense of a union, nation building and uniting us. We trusted that certain things would have been done from the white establishment. The reason why I say white establishment, because they held all the cards, because they were recognized as having all the facilities and all the wherewithal in terms of making us move forward professionally, right? And there was an element of trust that was bestowed and faith in them. And obviously going down the line, to a large extent, that has proven to be, we feel aggrieved that we weren't able to trust, and this is where the distrust and the mistrust comes from. So those foundations were obviously the start of it all. And as a result of it, we were almost, in a sense, the stigma in the air is almost like we were permitted to partake at the table. We were permitted to join the table that wasn't ours. And as a result of it, we came in almost beggarly and saying, can we be there? And that was indignant in the very first place. We weren't beggarly. We had structures. I refer there to IT. It's actually a documentary called Injury Time. And Injury Time, unravels and explains the exact how unification was done. It's on my YouTube channel as well. There's an extract of it. So you can, the listeners can actually have a look at it. It is very educational and something that we need to point out, particularly to white listeners. It is something that we were very proud of, and it worked brilliantly. And in my view, it can still be revived to some extent to address some of the issues. So with this permission, we tend to have the sense that they in control and they permitted us to come to the table and partake in their game. And because the fields and the infrastructure, the networks were all theirs, we needed to be developed, as Mr. Manek said earlier. And that in and of itself was problematic. I'll make the statement here so there can be a context understanding of the context. You see, the problem is if you don't value people in the right way, essentially, you will treat them in a bad way. So we weren't valued enough because our history hasn't been told. So when you see people in a certain way, you treat them as such. And I made a statement in the back end there. If I see you as weak, I then must help you. And we didn't need to be helped. If I see you as broken, then I must now fix you. And that's the problem. We weren't broken. We had proper structures in place. But if I see you as valuable, I will now serve you. But we weren't served. We needed to serve them. Now, the first two components there speaks about coming over someone. I see you as weak, so I have to come over and help you. I see you as broken, I have to come over and I need to fix you. But if I see you as valuable, I don't come over you, I don't dominate you, I come underneath you because I want to lift you up, because I see your value. And that hasn't happened at unification. At unification, you were disrespected and disregarded. And that's where the flaw started. We allowed some to be seen more valuable than others. And that's where the problem started.
And why do you think that was the case? What do you think is the cause for that mishap? For valuing others more than others?
So again, I'm going to refer to that documentary. It does far more justice to it. Injury Time, it explains everything in detail, but there were concessions made for the sense of nation building, for the spirit of unification. And yes, we were fast-tracked because we weren't a democracy at that point, but that freedom series was a way to say, a good faith in saying we wanted to celebrate this freedom that's at hand. So it was a good thing to go to India and say, let's open up this international arena once again in good faith that we're going to find ourselves coming together. So it was a way to celebrate, no, we're no longer going to be apart. We are now going to celebrate our freedom. We're no longer imprisoning ourselves from the world. We want to celebrate our freedom, all of us, not just the people that the exclusive sector that couldn't play international cricket, every single one of us, right?
Yes.
And as a result, because the undermining of, call it the SACOS model, because remember, I think Mr. Chair, you mentioned it earlier in the week, the non-racial concept was very much a principled approach to things. There were huge emphasis on principles. There were strong, hardline principled participants in that organization. So when you forgoed and you disregarded or disrespected SACOS, when you disbanded it and you don't even recognize it as valuable, essentially what you're now doing is you're going soft on principles. You are sacrificing some principles for the sake of expediency. And in the process, you are gaining the world, the prestige world of cricketdom, right? This brand new international market. But in a sense, you are losing principles and you're losing your soul. And that's why I have the quote there. The quote says, "It's of absolute no worth to gain rewards and prestige of the cricket world at the expense of souls." Again, I refer to the beastly nature. This system has done that from inception with freedom, with the Freedom Tours of 1991. In retrospect, we have to judge it fairly. It is exactly that. Now, the system has then gone soft on principles at that point, but it's actually encouraged us all in certain small ways to constantly surrender to losing our souls in small, subtle ways. And we are soul-crushingly experiencing these things through the system. And these are black and white, because those who are in charge were white and were permitted to do this type of acts, they don't even know they're at odds. So I'm not making excuses for them. They need to be enlightened. We need to light the candle and enlighten them that they are causing harm to themselves and others. Those are the souls I'm referring to. I don't quite know how those who are perpetuating, call it evil doings on another, actually sleep well at night. With malice, they actually are destroying people's lives. And as a result of it, they do not understand, because they're getting away with it, they have no form of guilt about it. There's no sense of apology. There's no sense of remorse. So they tend to just constantly promote this beast to get bigger and stronger. And at some point right now, things are falling apart, and they must, until we can create a new part. Because souls cannot be surrendered at the expense of experiencing.
Now,
So
you mentioned after that gratefully disillusioned, you mentioned a lot of events. Is there something and obviously they are just listed there.
Yes.
Can you please maybe explain the rationale behind mentioning these events and these individuals?
yeah, I'm moving on to the next one. I just point number one, that was 1991. So
Because I don't want you to, when the chairperson then tells you that it's time to finish, you feel that you haven't covered,
Yes.
No,
things that
not
you
a
wanted
problem.
to talk about. Yes.
No, not a problem. Okay. That was a strong point I needed to make. It will be the theme of all the others. So I just needed to make that point and make it firm.
Yes.
So with every pleasure in life, there's a price to be paid. And I think the price of souls is not the worthwhile price for the pleasure of a cricket world #1 status or the best in the world in cricket. I don't think that's the worthwhile. We can have both. And that's the prerogative of what we're attempting to do here. Social justice and nation building is saying, can we do it without having to pay such a dire price, such a big price? So let's move on to the next, and you'll see how everything unfolds from there in almost chronological order. 1992, which is less than a year, because that tour was in September, I would imagine, the 91 tour, and the World Cup was in February, March of 1992. So in a couple of months, we needed to now get ready for World Cup, right? And we put the team together. And when doing that now, what has happened subsequently was we prioritized winning above all, because the glory of the cup was now becoming the emphasis. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that we needed to go and to be part of it, but as a consequence, winning became the focus, because we became marginally short in that affair. If you can recall the 92 World Cup, we needed 22 of 1, and we were in contention there with the rain and so forth. I think that was God intervention, divine intervention with the rain, to my view, because in my view, we weren't ready to have that type of glory, seeing as we just came out of isolation. We needed to find our way to each other, and we weren't united as yet. Winning a cup was never going to unite us. It's a fallacy. It was never going to do that. Okay. Next point. So winning became a priority there, and the powers that be will keep pushing this winning narrative. We needed to win, and we need to prepare for winning. And yes, we have a professional team. We can win, but we can also build a nation. You can have both. It's not mutually exclusive. So the next point there is 2000. The year 2000 was a seminal moment. It was a moment of reckoning. There are many moments of reckoning for us to take a recheck, to relook at things. And we are not paying attention, and as a result, we keep perpetuating the same problems. 2000 was the Cronje saga. Cronje match fixing was an alarm bell for us to say, we cannot prioritize, because remember, match fixing, what is that? That's an element of self-seeking greed or self-interest. Again, it comes through the nature of things. We got to make sure, and Arendse said this himself, by the way, I'm not incriminating him in any way. This is all part of public hearings, that greed took over, and for the sake of self-interest, he was willing to sell his soul, in a sense, to gain the world of cricket, or to gain his own privileges. Because now, what has happened was principles were sacrificed, and essentially, cricket wasn't necessarily needing to be the winner. I needed to win. I will use cricket to actually get all forms of rewards for myself, financial and other, so that I can have a life outside of the game. Because in essence, it's a means to an end. So Cronje was a shake-up for us to say, here's a South African captain that was honored and adored, and he had huge leadership capabilities by all accounts, but has succumbed to something as sinister as match fixing, and has since been found guilty, but self-interest was the driving force. That is a soft skill. Now, when we didn't see those character flaws, it's because we're not looking. But what we then did was to make Cronje a martyr. Instead, we crucified him, and instead of using him as a hero to say, we need to learn from this guy so that this never, ever happens again. We need to use him as a poster person, respectfully, and say, can this become something that becomes a fundamental foundation that we would never and never again do something like this? And that's where we left the seed in the ground so that it can raise it later, with match fixing constantly being perpetuated within cricket structures in South Africa. Or not just match fixing, sorry, let me say better, self-interest or self-serving tendencies. Yeah. So when we buried Arendse, when I say buried, I mean metaphorically. I know it is the late Cronje. I don't mean it disrespectfully at all. He's my hero to this day for his admission of fault and asking for forgiveness. But we needed to use that wrongdoing. It is wise, as you know, Mr. Chair, that it is best to learn from one's mistakes. But it is even wiser to learn from other people's mistakes. You do not need to knock your head to make changes. You can learn from when other people have faulted. And yet we are not doing that. We haven't done it in 2000. So if you look at 2002, 2 years later, Saka therefore becomes amalgamated or incorporated. Saka becomes a commodity in the game. And now the emphasis is on commercial rights. Commercial rights. This is now interest, business interest, money-making interest. We are going in the wrong direction. We've just 2 years earlier than that, haven't addressed the issue of self-interest because we didn't see it. And now we are now making commercial viability a focus, because that's why they were created. They were created to look after the interest, the commercial interest of players. So they're prioritizing their earning potentials. I'll move on, and I'm making these statements loosely, and I'm not incriminating or saying anything, I'm just saying it from an observational point of view. 2013, Captain Graham Smith gets appointed. I speak under correction, but I think he was one of the youngest captains to be appointed at the time.
Indeed, Russell. That's what the newspapers are saying. They say he was the youngest.
Yeah.
Yes, I think he was 21 or 22.
Yes. So again, everything rises and falls on leadership. If we take that into account, if that is true, then what are we doing here? You're seeing a potential leader, someone who has leadership strength and ability, and we are saying that this individual can help us rise. to an extent, but it's a 21-year-old. And essentially, how much life experience has this individual been informed of? How much character development has he really had? Particularly in light of the fact that he was going to be leading a senior statesman in his team.
Yes.
Now that way is another form of error. Not in the fact that he was appointed, but in the fact that there weren't scaffolding support around him in terms of mentoring and leadership strengthening, maturity. In my view, he's actually gone, from a character point of view, I don't think there was a strong enough focus on that development. So what we tend to have then, and I'll use this quote from Edward the VIII, which says, "The thing that impresses me most about America is the way parents obey their children." Now, I want to paraphrase that and say the thing that's unimpressive of me about CSA at the time, or the protest, is how they appointed someone that's younger than them to rule the roost and not give support on that. So what that tends to do, if you look at any household, if I were to give my eldest daughter permission to dictate what happens in a household without guidance, we are going to create chaos. We are essentially going to create spoiled brats. That's the ultimate end of what you do there. It's almost like a curse. I think it's an Eastern curse that says, it goes, again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm a quote guy. I live in the world of quotes. So just bear with me.
Yeah.
The curse goes like this: may you have all that you've asked for. And from previous submissions, we've given so much power and authority to a captain or coach in this system that we essentially empowered people to become spoiled brats. We haven't considered the soft skills growth, the maturation, the character building attributes that is essential to sustain success and significance. And I say this again in the most loving, corrective manner. I'm not having an accusation against anyone. The fruits are there for itself. And I speak from a personal account. Every single one of us, and I coined the phrase, a bractectomy. Brat, B-R-A-T, sectomy. Similar to a vasectomy, where you're cutting away. Every one of us has a potential brat on the inside of us, a spoiled brat who wants to get his way. Any kid, and I know we have fathers that are listening here, any kid or mothers, any kid knows when they come, the first thing they tend to say is mine or mine. That's mine, the toys. Now, if you keep giving the empowerment to a kid that way, you become a brat. Now, if we keep giving constantly without any correction or guidance, the way of these type of scenarios, we're disempowering that individual. It's a sad reality, and I feel compassion for someone like Graham, for instance, in that regard, as a 21-year-old, as well as everyone that's going to be affected by that. And he was a personality that was quite, I call it a trumpet blower type of personality. Someone who was very vocal and very, he reprimanded a sense of aura about him. He had a sense of authority about himself. But authority doesn't just come from a title, and neither does it come purely because someone else gives it to you. Authority comes from character. It comes from earning the right to say certain things. You do not have the right to say certain things unless you either get given it or you've earned the right to say it. You asked me earlier to do my background, and I had to explain to you why I have the right, based on my experiences, to say what I'm saying now, because I've had first-hand account of it. That's the authoritative voice I have to say what I say. That's why you can respect my submission as a credible source. Now, it is based on character of having gone through it myself. I have personal life experiences of being a brat myself, because I'm an eldest in my family, and I got given privileges because of being the oldest and being permitted to make certain decisions. I was escalated to become that brat unknowingly. And that is some of the flaws That is why we are having discrimination, racial and other, in the system. And these are things that have been echoing for years. This is not new. The cricket system knows these things. I've been echoing and saying it. And it's a human thing. It's a humanitarian thing. And yet we are missing the boat because we are trying to do institutional thinking, group think. We're trying to be wise in our own eyes, and we are missing the boat. The answer lies on the basis of soft skills, of character. So what we tend to do then is, instead of, because you know, a 21-year-old is worried about his image, for instance. I'm just using it as illustration, and I can use countless illustrations. We can even go on to A.B. de Villiers afterwards in 2010, 2014, 2015, when he was there. It's a similar scenario. Guys who are highly talented tend not to think of themselves that they can be touched or told what to do because they've got super ability. But humility needs to be part of their upbringing. They need to be wrapped on the knuckles and be pulled aside and says, you cannot do this. You're being disrespectful. You cannot take the glory just for yourself and think that your voice is the sole voice. You're not an island in this world. Other people matter. And we haven't done that to an extent in the cricket system. So A.B. de Villiers is also another personification of that. So I don't want to victimize Graham in a sense, but because he was the captain, as it says, you want to be in the kitchen there with the heat, you need to take it. And this is why I believe I'm pointing out the brachyctomy. Now, that whole crew that we talked about with the big five is part of that brachyctomy, the necessity for a brachyctomy. And no one has held them accountable. And this is what we're attempting to do now when the things have fallen flat. Circumstantially, we are needing to go in that direction. If we don't, this is not sustainable. Not at all. So, as I said, as a 21-year-old, I would imagine, I know myself, I speak for myself. When I was a 21-year-old, I was concerned about my own image. How am I portrayed to the world? What can I have that gives off this image of success, right? You're up and coming, making your way. So image and reputation is the prize. Reputation, that is the priority, not character. Character is not even discussed because it was sacrificed in 1991 already with the principal Sakos. So essentially, reputation is where we are focused everything on. And this is why the media who basically puts our perspective and safeguards reputations. And when people are victimized and discriminated against, they go find skeletons, character flaws, so that they can tarnish reputation so that you can never come back from it. Now, we are all flawed. We have all fallen short of the glory, if you want to call it that. Every single one of us. There's no fallacy as in someone's a perfect human being. But when you start using reputation as a measurement of whether you have earned the right, you are deluding yourself. It is too superficial and too shallow. Character is what is the basis that needs to inform you, not reputation. And this is where cricket needs to grow up. We are 30 years down the dispensation, and we have still not grown up. We are talking institutional talk, which is too rigid, and we are talking about box ticking and those sorts of scenarios, and we are not looking at character. We are looking at people who are cashing in on a salary and haven't really considered how much of a price have I really played to serve this game wholeheartedly. And for the most part, when you have guys like Graham who have started the who were to become identity of the Proteas, and subsequently Protea Fire has come from Graham Smith, he's taken acknowledgement of that. Protea Fire is really an egotistical marketing gimmick to try and self-boast. That's all it is, because there's no substance to it. This whole thing is bottomed out in itself. There's no foundation to the skyscraper that was built. And we need to have to relook, and we need to be comfortable that things need to be restarted, because it wasn't actually started on the basis of solid ground in the first place. Okay. 2008, UCB was formed, or 2000, the UCB changed to CSA. Now it became a corporate commodity. I believe that's the time where Gerald Majoli became CEO, being handed over from Ali Bacher. Now, when you go corporate identity, your focus is completely changed. So which means money making becomes the priority now. So you can see that further down the line, we are still prioritizing money and reputation, lack of character, all those sorts of things. Money is still the emphasis. Winning, that will bring money. Because if you're winning, you can get the corporates to put money towards associate with you, right? So money becomes the rule. And the focus, and essentially development or transformation becomes a secondary, right? Even though we have a black face in Gerald Majola, you would not be able to use that very money to be able to address transformation because it's not the focus. You have not made it important. So again, let me use an analogy of accounting. I can tell you what you find valuable by the basis of what you spend your money on. But it needs to be in the spirit in which you spend your money on. Are you sincerely wanting to make a difference? Or are you just throwing money at something that is actually just to show that money is being spent? So let me move on. 2009, the IPL was an expression of just that. It became like our version. I'm talking about IPL SA. It was in 2009. It was basically selling our space to the IPL and creating this relationship with the IPL, which basically confirmed that money emphasis and our promised land now became a focus. We've arrived somewhat at the big stage because IPL has come in South Africa. And money became an issue because that's what Gerald Majola's bonus scandal became a concern too. And his reputation was tarnished as a result of seemingly prioritizing money. Okay? Now this is where you've pointed out the rainbow concept. Now, we think not in terms of words as in DOG. When I say dog, you don't think DOG, you see a physical dog. So if you want a rainbow concept, right? I think we know that for most part, the rainbow nation is an illusion for most part. We can all subscribe to that, right? To an extent. The rainbow nation was an ideal that we were hoping to try and get towards. But just imagine the rainbow for a sense. And let me paint this picture. What we tend to have done from the starting point when this rainbow nation was initiated. So I think if I speak under correction, it was Desmond Tutu that initiated the Rainbow Nation. I'm not sure if it was in your time, Mr. Chair, with the TRC or beyond that, or if it was even earlier than that.
Yeah, but it got prominence during that period because of the ethos of the behind the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
So the rainbow concept is an ideal. It is something that we would aspire towards, but it will take time to get there, as anything like transformation would do, right? But what we did was, we said we are a rainbow nation. We declared our freedom and prescribed to what we called we unified, but we actually weren't. It would have been a journey, okay? And essentially what we've done from the inception of 1991, and with this fast-tracking chronology, what I've just explained, we've gone from the quickest point, from point A, which is the start of the rainbow, to the end of the rainbow. That's the shortest point towards the pot of gold. Because we started looking at the pot of gold. Remember, these are all imaginary concepts, but we prioritize the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Now, if you look at the shape of the rainbow that goes, the arc that goes up and down, that is symbolic in that all the colors of the nation, the people in this nation would come together, right? On the basis of walking this longer journey towards that pot of gold. It's an up and down type of dynamic. We have to go through ups and downs, fights and battles to find a way towards each other so that we can truly say we are a unified nation. And once we get to that unified space, then we can get the pot of gold. We didn't do that. We pretended as if we were going on up and down, but we actually went from point A straight to point B, which is the imaginary pot of gold. And that pot of gold, as we now know, is not a pot of gold for everyone, only for a certain people. And that is the way of the loser, because some are going to win and some are going to lose. And we are all sacrificing our souls in the process for that world of gold that we want. So let's fast track, if I may, move on to the next one.
Yes.
When you do that, by the way, it's like a kid. When you give a kid, I'm going to give you a Audi R8. I give a kid, but you don't have any capacity. You don't have a license, but I give you an R8. That car is so powerful. You are going to destroy yourself and the car and everyone in its way. When you don't understand the purpose of something, you will abuse it. And as a result of it, that's what we've done. We've chased the gold, and we didn't have the character to sustain it. We had no foundation secure enough to uphold the skyscraper and gold building that we were trying to achieve. 2017. Now, these are seminal moments in the game. I must say to you, I'm pointing it out early, but this is a seminal moment that we missed again. It was again an alarm bell going off that not many people are aware of. And yet, I've been saying this inside the systems, but people are institutionalized in their thinking, and they can't do anything. Their hands are tied because we've started a beast that we couldn't overthrow. We need to take this giant down. Mark Boucher is the Titans coach. And again, at the same event, this is 2018, so 2017-2018 season, it was in the exact same moment where the Sandpaper Gate unfolded in Newlands, in Cape Town, with Cricket Australia. Okay? Now, Cricket Australia has admitted that they had an ethics committee and they fell short and all those sorts of things, and they had a win at all cost philosophy. Cricket Australia essentially was a team that was unstoppable. They become highly talented, a winning team. Unstoppable. Someone spoke about it early in the week. They were the best team in the world at this. I think it was Ashwell, actually. They were the best team in the world. And they became arrogant. And essentially, they got into a win at all cost mentality. Win at any cost. And then it eventually came out that they surrendered character-wise because of that pursuit of that goal of being so arrogant that they flawed on Sandpaper Gate. Ethics. Lack of ethics. Now, what was interesting, at the exact same moment in time, there was a similar seminal experience happening. I was a part of the game at the Cobras versus we were in the system. Cobras was playing the Lions, but at the same time, Titans was playing the Knights in Benoni, right? At the exact same moment that this was happening. So what has happened was, this was the last game of the season, last game of the Supersport season, and 4, possibly 5 teams could possibly win that series if they had to win win their respective matches. All 3 franchise games were happening at the same time. And what has happened? It was a concern because Nicky Boyer, as the coach of the Knights, and Mark Boucher apparently came together and conceded to agree, because there were 2 days washed out of that game, of their games in Benoni, as well as 2 days was washed out. I think it was in Durban, where the Dolphins was playing the Warriors. So they were in the same boat. Rain was affecting everyone, right? The only game that was taking place was the Cobras versus the Lions. The Lions were out of contention for winning the championship, but the rest of the teams were in the running, right? So what then happened was, Mark Boucher and Nicky Boyer, after 2 days of rain, decided to force a result of the 4-day match in Benoni by, up front, before the game started, to declare at 40 overs. So I'm going to bowl 40 overs to you. Whatever you get, you declare. Then I'll face 40 overs. Whatever I get, I declare. Or if you bowl me out, 40 overs are done, and then we go into the second innings. Now, essentially, for 4-day cricket, you are now threatening the spirit of the game, the spirit of the competition, because that's not how cricket works necessarily. You are changing a 4-day game into a 1-day game scenario. What subsequently happened was the Titans won that match and essentially won the title. Now, technically, this is not unlawful. It's not unlawful. According to the laws of the game, you can do this, but it is unethical. The spirit in which you've done something was to force a result, to go for the gold at the expense of possibly losing your soul. But if you're soulless, it doesn't have a consequence because we didn't hold him to account. We didn't hold anyone to account for that matter. You cannot necessarily threaten the spirit of the competition, which is a 4-day competition, in that fashion by turning it into a 1-day match. Now, these are frustrations that was happening behind the scenes, and yet something that was never addressed. It was supposedly swept under the carpet. I don't think anything has come of it. But that is now, you can use that fact that Mark Boucher has won that title, and therefore it's part of his winning record to substantiate the reason for him to be appointed elsewhere. Because I've won. But on what basis did you win? Did you really win? Sometimes winning is not winning. Sometimes winning is losing because you lack character and you lack honor in the process of that. Why would you want that type of poison chalice in a way? But because we didn't prioritize principles and integrity and so forth and character, that seemingly is of no consequence to guys like the Titans as well as everyone else in the system. That's why I said everyone is complicit and become beastly in this regard. And this is why, again, I echo why I needed to leave the system, because it would steal and rob myself. I couldn't be a part of something like that. So I come as an outside, independent consultant to assist and guide maturation, in a sense, towards truthfulness and realness and genuineness and growth. So 2020, essentially because we didn't recognize that seminal moment, no one paid attention to it. And let me just point out also, Cricket Australia was in a very dark moment with that experience. But what we tend to do as Proteas was basically to throw more shade on it. Instead of having compassion and saying, how could we possibly have also faulted in this manner or have tendencies to go towards things like this? We need to be very careful to judge people who are down. We need to show compassion and maturity and say, we feel for you and we cannot be a judge of you, because next time we could possibly be in that situation.
Just contextualize that. Can you just contextualize that, it's BLM, I know what it means. But it's 2020, BLM, 3TC. Just put a context to that. BLM is Black Lives Matter, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, I'm getting to that. I just went back 1 second just to point out the Cricket Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was saying there was that as members of the Proteas, they had an opportunity to actually say that we empathize and have compassion for the Australians, which to an extent I think Hashim Amla attempted to say publicly. But what they needed to go further and do is to say, how could we prevent this happening to ourselves? But they postured themselves very self-righteously and said, yeah, good for you. You were always arrogant and wanting to win all the time, and judge them. But you need to be careful. What you judge others of, you will be judged yourself. Now, these are, again, because you're a leader and because you represent us all, we have to name you, right? And we have to name you flaws-wise. Now, this intervention is necessary so we can move forward and the hard truths need to be said. But someone like Faf du Plessis, for instance, Faf du Plessis, I think it was fined 2 occasions for potentially ball tampering, right? One was the zip incident, and the other one was Lollygate. Now, it's not really a consequence, but you can't necessarily be guilty of the same thing and then want a finger point. I'm not saying Faf did that, but as a leader, you should be leading your troops and saying, guys, we were once put under this scrutiny, and it pained us that we were reputationally being scarred this way, or even challenged for our motives. We need to show compassion and strength here and be a good ambassador for cricket and stand for good things, for the spirit of the game. But we didn't take that posture. We finger pointed and we were laughing at the fact that they needed to be humbled. But our humbling was coming. And this is why I went back to this point, that we missed that moment. And 3 years down the line, our humbling moment was BLM. BLM was that humbling moment. It had nothing to do with cricket, but it was always coming. You can only keep going in the wrong direction until something changes the direction for you, circumstantially. And BLM, I believe, has started that process for us. Now, it just so happened that with BLM, the 3TC was happening at the same time. Now, a 3TC event was another commercial thing. So it was a challenge on this social justice or this new imperative of changing things and going through a real arc of a rainbow, trying to find our way to each other on good ground. 3TC was another side thing to try and threaten that, because 3TC was nothing but a innovative attempt at trying to introduce a new product into the game for commercial reasons, and that others paid for. But at that 3TC event, the members who were financially invested decided to take a knee. Everyone, including these white guys now that will not take a knee. They took a knee and they showed a solidarity fist. So there's lack of empathy and double standards that was said earlier. Why would you do it there when it suits your purposes, but later, when it suits other people's purposes, which you are a leader for, you serve them, you do not take a knee? Now, do not bring up religious convictions when you talk about knee, because I myself am a religious person or a spiritual person, not religious. So you cannot argue that, because if someone had to guide you, it would be explained to you why it's okay to take a knee. Because there were sufferings of the past that you are disrespecting and devaluing others for. And yet, without any explanation, we just permit this, and it needs to change. We cannot have it. We cannot have it. I'm an independent voice. I have no part to play in this game. I don't get paid from the system. So I can say these things without fear of manipulation. But people inside the system cannot do that.
Russell, if I may ask you, what's your take on the current stance that it is open to those players who prefer to take the knee? It's up to the individual players themselves. What is your take to that?
Especially if one say, the question is...
My perspective is one of lack of leadership. They're not showing any foresight. No one is explaining to these guys the imperative. They do not have the education, neither do they have the interest to want to have the education on why that is happening. I know they did a culture camp, and there was some member tasked to do the unpacking, and part of their values that they came out of that camp was empathy and inclusion. Now, you're not showing empathy. We can't just keep talking lip service wise, this is what we do, this is what we're about, and yet we don't demonstrate it. Someone has to point out that's there to say, guys, this is actually a moment to express empathy, but no one is doing that. You can't just say empathy is our value and then we left it there on the camp when you were in the bush.
Yes.
You can't just talk about it once, you have to live it. And that's the stance I have. Because of lack of education and lack of leadership, no one is strong enough as a leader, character-wise, to actually explain why it needs to happen. We had an incident, and I'm possibly incriminating someone here by saying this. We had a president of EP Cricket pass away, which was the SACOS president of old. At that stage in time, he passed away. And we had a television game in the course of that period. And it was our perfect opportunity for us to wear black armbands as a sense of honor and respect for this stalwart of the struggle. And essentially, we did not get to put on the armband because certain members decided not to recognize, it was intentionally, not to recognize the struggle stalwarts of the past regime. So we're ignoring and devaluing, and that needs to change. We cannot keep being disrespected and yet being spoken of equals. We're never going to be equal if we're not valued in the proper manner. And that's what needs to happen. So the fact that people are not explaining to, I don't know, we don't want to mention names, but all these guys who are choosing to do different things, it's purely ignorance on their side or arrogance. They don't want to know. And we need to be able to be stronger. People represent us not just with a cricket bat. I don't care how skilled you are, you represent us beyond the cricket bat. You have to have character because you're a role model to people out there. People are watching and are wanting to be and replicate and emulate what you're all about. And if you're not doing the right thing for the right reasons, because of arrogance and ignorance. We need to change that. You're in the public view for a reason.
But what would you say if people are saying, you see, you are mixing politics with sport when you start to bring in things like the Black Lives Matter movement, taking the knee, and all such related politically charged stances?
Mr. Chair, respectfully, again, that's almost institutionalized thinking. We need to get to the spirit of what that's all about. We're not necessarily entertaining Black Lives Matters as an organization or an entity. We understand where it is informed from the struggles of people suffering. And that's why we want to stand in solidarity. We want to stand in unity for the struggles. It's the spirit of showing strength to someone who is unfairly treated. Those are the things that we need to explain. Not a movement. I don't join movements. I join people in support because I believe that they're standing for the right reason, and I want to show support to my fellow South African next to me who is suffering and who has previously suffered in the past. So when you put labels on it, you have power with a label, but you also limit with a label. So when you put a BLM label on it, it essentially robs you of the potential of getting to the essence of it. Don't lose the message with a fallible message sender. The message is still there. People have struggled and suffered. Can you at least show empathy towards that? And that suffering is not far. It's in your team. It's right next to you. So those are the type of things that we have to get past this institutionalized thinking, the rigidness of institutionalized hashtag BLM type of scenario. It's about the spirit of what we are doing, trying to show support for someone who is suffering. Keep it down to human basic, experiences. Don't show an apathy for others when they are explaining to you, I am feeling hurt by this, and I would really enjoy your support, or at least consider supporting me. Don't dismiss it offhandedly and defend it on the basis of unfounded, like I said, lack of education, lack of wisdom, lack of leadership. We cannot just leave it at that. Now, we don't necessarily have to take a stance holistically as a team. And this is what I think you're asking me, right? As a Proteas. But we have to be strong in terms of we are representing the country. So what is on our heart to do in terms of showing? So for instance, look at the New Zealanders. The New Zealanders said, okay, we don't need to take a knee, but we live these things, but to demonstrate it publicly, let's put bare feet together. Let's do something that shows genuineness, not disingenuous approaches to things. And because of our past of not being trusted to do the right thing, this is something we needed to be stronger about. Because it has shaken us to look at stuff that has been missing for a long time. Otherwise, another 2 years down the line, we're going to have another alarm bell, another warning. And we need to listen at some point. Because after alarm bells, ultimately, is death. If you don't pay attention, death comes. Death to your career, death to the institution. Can I move on?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so I'm speaking to all of these things. So I'll probably go quite fast through it because I brought it up already. The other one is relational equities. Now, relational inequities are basically, we have equity is value, right? Equity is a commodity. It's something you can sell. It's something of prestige, something of value. It's precious. But we do not have the preciousness of relationship. All of what life is about relationships. I would imagine that's what Ubuntu is about. I am who I am because of you, right? Other-centered. Relationships is what matters, but we do not have relational equity as a priority, as a focus. For the most part, we are willing to sacrifice relationships for the sake of experiencing and for the sake of chasing either a win or the goal. So relationship inequities in cricket is very prevalent. And as a result of it, we need to prioritize it as a central thing. Because right now, distrust has been a major issue, and we cannot find our way to each other. Even this new board, for instance, people are already saying, no, they cannot be trusted. Whenever you get into power as a position, it changes you. Powerful positions will reveal what's on the inside of you. If you have character and credibility, it will definitely come to the fore. But if you're susceptible to unethical means, you would be persuaded. So therefore, trust is a big issue. So relational equity is where I'm saying needs to be pointed with focus. So what I looked at there is the soft skills revolution, as I said. Because we devalue relationships, we need to make it an emphasis. So sponsorships and corporates, the reason why they haven't left the game of cricket right now, the ones that are still existing, is because they're still trusting, relationally trusting Cricket South Africa to do the right thing. And SJN is part of the process to get that right thing. Otherwise, they would feel like the damage is so far gone that the value of CSA is so diminished that as a result, they would pull the plug and say, no, we're walking away, we don't see any value in you. But because of trust and the relationship equity that they still have with those sponsors, they are staying on board. So
Russel,
we need to enhance that genuinely.
Russel,
Yes, sir.
time is the enemy. We should be adjourning these proceedings at 3:30, but I take into account that we started a little bit later than 13:30. Can you select a topic which is burning in your mind, in your presentation, which you can do in the next 8 minutes?
Yes, I can, sir.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump. I just want to mention, because your emphasis on women. So because we don't have soft skills as a priority, the discrimination, because women generally personify soft skills. They are very emotional beings, and I'm generalizing, but for the most part, they personify that. And because we don't value soft skills, women tend to be undermined and suppressed. And that's part of the reason why it happens, okay? I'll just say that.
Yes.
The game culture, I was asked earlier about culture, from the Latin word cultus, which actually means care. Now, care is a soft skill. It's an abstraction, right? And it speaks about, that's what culture is all about. When you have an environment of care, people can actually basically surprise you with what they can actually achieve. So if I move quickly on, culture needs to become a focus, in my view, in terms of changing these narratives, these character narratives with inside individuals as well as team spaces, organizationally as well as on the field. So number 4, I think the imperative of this hearing is transformation. So one of the definitions of transformation is an in-out approach. So what I've said there is transformation needs to happen from the inside of an individual and then lead outwardly. It cannot be outside. We cannot address it from the outside in. We have tried that for numerous times, and I know you spoke about quotas and targets and all those sorts of things. I believe those type of things needed to have happened because the powers that be were there were not, they didn't deliver on their promises. So therefore there needed to be an intervention of sorts, and we need to impose sanctions, so to speak, right? And as a result of it, it became a seasonal thing, in my view, targets. Okay, you can have something for a season. That's part of the nature of things, right? And we need to, at some point in time, take targets away. But transformation has to happen from the inside out. And transformation is not just non-white. Transformation is for white people too. And in this regard, I would say, this is where I come with a head and heart thing. I'm making generalized statements, but it goes across the board. Okay, non-white people or black people tend generally, from my experience, needing to have head transformation, i.e. the way they think about certain things. Think professionally, think bigger, think, you know what I mean? Think more progressively, think more wiser. Whereas generally white people, particularly those at the helm with the fingers on the trigger switches, they need heart transformation. I think Ashraf Ali made a mention of the charitable AfriForum needing to show some charity. That is one form of heart. You need to show that if you have muscle financially, this is where you can come to the fore. Show some heart and show some empathy for people's plight of struggles. So they also need to ask themselves, AfriForum, why the quotas was instituted in the first place. It was because people were not delivering on their promises of actually reforming the game or transforming the game with numbers. So, but I do agree with them that when you have an imposition of targets, what you then do is violate free will. Now, for a period, I need to put people in a naughty corner if you're disobedient as kids, right? I'm using that metaphor. But I can take you out of that corner because I can't leave you there forever. You will start rebelling. And that's what the targets have started to do. It created rebellion, okay? Because you are violating free will. One thing we cannot take away is that God has given us free will and he himself will not violate free will. But he'll put you in a position that you have to choose the right thing. And that's what we need to start doing regarding things like this. So I'm rushing through this, but I want to give you the definition of transformation so I can leave it on record. Okay?
Yes.
This is from John Maxwell. John Maxwell, by the way, is a leadership guru, world-renowned, and I ascribe to a lot of his philosophies. He wrote a recent book. It's particularly pertinent to what you're trying to do here, Mr. Chair. After the inquiry is probably to make changes, and his book is titled Change Your World.
Change your world.
Change your world. We need to change the cricket world.
All right.
The cricket world, I put cricket in brackets there, okay? The cricket world needs people who care, who help, and who can be trusted. And a table of transformation helps us become those people. Transformation begins in an individual, grows in a community, and impacts society. But the process always starts with partnerships based on common ground. And that for me is a very strong definition of transformation. It starts inside someone, it impacts and grows in a community, whether that's the team and the support and beyond, and it impacts society. Right now, we don't necessarily have an impact on society. When the cricket, one of my saddest moments in cricket was when we played and became #1 in the world in test rankings at Lords. I remember the players walking off, brilliant game, brilliant match, down to the wire. But we walked off with a smug look on our face, in my view, the way I read it, of pointing #1 to the camera. And all I could see was the discrimination that was being faced with people inside that team and on the ground. But we are solely focused on being #1, and we are sacrificing souls in the process. And the people behind who are not showing #1 were probably considering how much money they would be getting from being #1, more so than how much difference they can make in society. And that is where the heart of the matter lies. So I want to just end off in a strong way, Mr. Chair, so that I can respect your time frames. I submitted I didn't even look at the proposal, and I don't think it's needed, because I will admit, and I said this to Famisa telephonically, this proposal, I'll just show it on camera. This proposal here is something that probably sits with every single CEO. I've spoken and had meetings with every single CEO at CSA, barring 2, the current acting CEO, and secondly, Ali Bacher. Everyone else I've actually discussed this type of proposal with them. And no one has actually opposed it. Everyone actually encouraged it. And I've taken their input into account. I've also taken this proposal to 5 of the 6 franchises is aware of this proposal too. So if you look at this proposal, I'm not going to go through it. I believe that if this type of thing has to be seriously considered in light of what we're investigating here, SJN, it is addressing and it will bring resolution to these type of things happening in the future. In actual fact, I think had we had spirited cricket instituted within the game, we probably wouldn't even have an SJN hearing. I just admit that to you.
Can you hold it up to Can you hold it up to your camera? Or is that possible?
I did hold it up, yeah.
Okay, yes, okay.
I believe this is an answer. It's a silver bullet to racial discrimination as well as nation building, the imperatives that you're seeking to address, the social justices. I believe that to be a silver bullet. Reason being, we have measured the success with this, and we've seen the impact. The proof is in the pudding. And I also believe that this model actually would fund a full-time office of OTO, which I believe needs to happen too. And this is something that the legacy, I mean, like you said, you're not looking for a job, Mr. J, but it's something that you can leave behind in the game. So, by the way, I'm not necessarily wanting to be at the forefront of this. This is just an idea that I'm sharing. I'm an ideas man, a visionary, and therefore I'm sharing this thing in relation to serving the game. So let me just point out here, Mr. Chair, on the website, if you go onto Cricket South Africa's website right now, it says there under the vision to make cricket a national sport of winners. To make cricket a national sport of winners. They do not say there, that's the vision. That's what the CEO is meant to be doing, is to make sure that that's a reality. He looks after the vision, right? Essentially, it does not say it needs a winning team. It doesn't need a protest team so that we can get money from broadcasting deals as well as sponsors. It says to make cricket a national sport of winners. Secondly, number two, the mission, which normally guides any institution. The mission is to create one team culture. Just a side note, you cannot create culture. Culture is a fruit. It's a byproduct. So that is actually a misstatement there. But it's probably said from uninformed means. But I understand the statement, to create a one-team culture. Now, culture is even put in brackets. In capitals. Now, you cannot regard culture that strongly if you're only doing it ad hocly. They employ consultants to come in from time to time to do a team building, as in a fierce building. And then when they go play, there's no culture addressed. No one is actually looking after culture. How can it be your mission when you didn't have someone in charge?
I don't know how the news people or the people who do interviews on radio or television, how they intervene and say, oh, yeah, but unfortunately we've reached the end of our interview. Because it's a difficult thing to do because, but I'm sure you appreciate. We have the benefit of your presentation, and I think these last 2 hours, because that's what it has been, have been quite useful. I have got another participant waiting in the wings. But whatever else you feel you would have canvassed with us further, it is still open for you to drop us a note or two. But I have to say your presentation has been very engaging. It has, again, challenged us and one wonders how we would have been able to even attempt an inquiry of the nature that we're doing if there were not people like you out there who are ready and willing to come out and state their views. And you speak from experience, you speak from a position where you have given a hard thinking as to not only what the problem is, but that now that, Cricket South Africa has recognized that there is a need for an SJN project, that there must be people like you who can inform and enrich the debate. And that, for me, is both a challenge, but also, something to be welcomed, because when I sit down in the end to consider what should go into our report by way of recommendations, I will obviously be assisted to a great deal by your presentation today, both in terms of, the slides that you have given us, which are deceptively very short, but when once one looks, realizes that, the pages themselves do not give an indication of the richness, of what is contained in when you speak to what is in these 4 or 5 pages and their annexures. And for that reason, I'm sorry. I wish we could have had a longer period of time, but then I've been feeling that way with virtually everybody else who has participated in these proceedings.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you to put it on record by you reading it yourself? It's just 4 lines.
Yes.
And then we can part and I can say bon voyage. Just the last page, you can say, because it summarizes everything that I'm wanting to share with yourself and the audience.
And that
on
is...
the last page.
Go ahead and read it.
I would like you, okay, I'll say it in my own voice then.
Okay.
It simply says, value people connecting, right?
Yes.
You see that part there? So
yes.
When you value people, you connect with them.
Yes.
We've just seen the opposite to be true as well. When you devalue people, you disconnect from them. Okay? Mm-hmm. So this is the process of how you transform and how you build trust. And which trust is a big issue right now. Okay? Value people, you connect with them. Secondly, you add value to people, you start influencing them.
Yes.
You live good values, you start being looking attractive, and you start attracting them to you. Now you're creating cohesion and unity.
Yes.
And lastly, you share good values, you now start transforming. That is the deeper sense of transformation. Then you become invaluable as an organization and as a team and as a grouping.
And on that,
thank you so much, sir, for the time.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
These proceedings to get the next witness. We are now 10 to 4. Can we get a 5-minute breathing space so that I can Good afternoon, Senior Counsel. Can you hear me? It doesn't appear. Have you muted yourself, Senior Counsel? Advocate Arendse.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and good afternoon to my colleagues.
Yes. Afternoon, Mr. Yeah. I think at this stage, given that you did appear before us as a scene setter, and I don't know whether you took an oath or we affirmed. I think you took an oath. Yeah. When last you appeared before us. So all I need to do now is... You took an oath, did you?
Yes, I did take an oath.
Yes. So I just have to remind you that you are still under oath. I understand that you want specifically to touch certain topics, and can I just read them as I understand them from your email? The first area you want to deal with is your personal interaction with players, in particular Black African, in your capacity as former president of CSA in the period 2000, I think 2007, 2008, or 2000 to 2008, and as lead independent director of the CSA board for the period 2013 to 2018. A number of players have already testified, and your contribution will assist us. That's the one area. The second area you want to touch upon are complaints received both individually and collectively from players of color and Black African players, and how these were addressed. And the third area is the quota versus the target debate and CSA's policies in this regard, with particular reference to the AfriForum presentation. And then the fourth area would be a more pointed address on the issue of unity in cricket, how it came about, how it has shaped our sports in general, and cricket in particular, and how it has impacted on the pace of transformation. And then the fifth and last head is possible solutions. Have I reflected the areas you want to touch? You are muted, Comrade Nelson. Arendse.
Oh, you're an expert by now. Okay.
Yeah, it tells when somebody's muted.
Yeah, you're an expert. Yeah, no, that's recorded in my exchange with Dumisa.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Chair, for inviting me again.
Yes.
I do have a time constraint, but I'll try and then cover those topics as quickly as possible. And as I indicated to Dumisa, I'll follow it up with a formal written statement or submission, which you can look at, consider, and see whether or not you want to either call me back again or ask me to elaborate on some aspects.
Yes.
So let me try and cover the issue of unity, the issue of targets and quotas, and the issue of transformation, perhaps all together.
Yes.
Now, today I think Hussein Manak and a few others before me, scene setters, covered quite adequately the background to unification in our sport. So the starting point will be on what basis and why did we unify? Now, you've heard by now, and I think you by now accepted as a fact, that many of us, before 1991, 1992, played our cricket either under the South African Cricket Board, which in turn fell under SACOS, the South African Council of Sport, and those of us who were black, generically black, and those who were predominantly white, played under the South African Cricket Union. So in the period from 1971, after South Africa's expulsion from the International Cricket Council, following the Basil de Oliveira affair in the period between 1968 and 1971, we played cricket under different national controlling bodies. The main what made us, those of us who played under the South African Cricket Board of Control and SACOS, what drove us that we can't play cricket, or we can't pretend to play normal cricket in a society which was abnormal, in other words, where the overwhelming majority of the population were under apartheid, separate policy of so-called separate development, and were denied all the things that we are familiar with: land, education, jobs, all the evils that we associate with apartheid. Towards the end of in the 1980s, or towards the end of the 1980s, there was a move by the African National Congress from Lusaka to seek to unify the sports bodies here domestically. And that resulted in SACOS, the South African Council of Sport, being weakened, and a rival body called the National Sports Congress was formed. The National Sport Congress was aligned to the African National Congress. And at that period in 1990, 1991, the leading figure in cricket became Percy Son.
Yes.
And the late Percy Son. And the South African Cricket Board of Control was already experiencing the exodus of some players, leading players, the most prominent of whom was Omar Henry, who testified before you already, where they were seeking to play cricket literally on the other side, and where the grass was greener, and encouraged by overtures that were being made by the South African Cricket Union and Dr. Ali Bacher in particular. And we were aware of meetings, secret meetings taking place between him and the late Eisenhower. So there was a weakening, there was a decline in our cricket. there was a deterioration of already poor facilities, and we moved and edged closer to what became known as unity. I had written an article which I will also forward to the panel, and I think it appears in the South African yearbook, one of the yearbooks. I was requested by a journalist called Colin Bryden, who's the editor, to write on this topic. So I will forward that article to you. And it records a quite seminal meeting that took place in the home of the late Percy Son, where very heated debate took place there. And when the Western Province Cricket Board, who up until that point was regarded as the bastion of the no normal cricket in an abnormal society approach, and at that point a person by the name of the late A.B. Adams was the president of Western Province Cricket Board. Percy then took over that position, and there was then a move towards the National Sports Congress, the ANC aligned Sports Congress. And I guess the background to all of that was, at the same time, running parallel was the ANC getting closer to the National Party government at the time, and moving towards the unbanning of Nelson Mandela, and talks between him and F.W. de Klerk. Now, I'm no sociologist. I'm not a political scientist. I'm a lawyer, an ex for my client, best interest of my client, and I'm guided by my instructions. But what I do know, and that's why I said what I do know, it doesn't require any science or data, is that all totalitarian nationalist societies in our history have always sought to demonstrate their superiority or its superiority in sports. I mean, the more recent examples are Nazi Germany, East Germany, Russia, China, and South Africa, under the National Party government. The absolute crown in the jewel for National Party South Africa were cricket and rugby. So I guess that the strategy of the ANC at the time was, well, if we could find some accommodation for rugby and cricket, then it would somehow soften and assuage the National Party and the white minority to come closer to a political settlement. And that was the basis, as you know, again, a fact. We concluded, or our leaders concluded, an arrangement at Kempton Park called the CODESA conference, and a new future for us was forged based on a negotiated settlement. So that provides the backdrop to our cricket, and it is that negotiated settlement, the need for unity, the need for reconciliation, that we're a rainbow nation and that we should all, we're all in this together and we should all move forward together. It is that provided this backdrop, and which ultimately, I'm afraid, also acted as a constraint, as a brake on transformation, not only in cricket, but in all of our sport. Because our early leaders, and I do speak from personal experience because I'm old enough to have known them very well and have sat with them in meetings, and I learned from them. That is where I come from. And I'm very proud that I can be associated with them. So the early part of our transformation was always based on not upsetting whites too much, not upsetting the apple cart. You can call it one of appeasement, where we assuaged to the needs of the white minority, and that was reflected in our sport. That is why our very first team that went to play in India was an all-white team, and we only had one player of color, Faik Davids, who, again, I played with and I played against, and he was just an amazing player. He went with, didn't play at all. They said they took him along for the experience. So that was permitted. And in subsequent years, our team changed little. Omar spoke about his selection, and then subsequently, the first player really post-Unity to be selected to play for the Proteas was Paul Adams. And I think I mentioned in my previous testimony that I'm just absolutely blown away by his courage, his talent, his determination, to have played in a team under Hansie Cronje and Alan Donald and Brian McMillan and all these guys. It just boggles my mind how he even managed to do that. But I suppose that is when you're young and you're fearless and you don't entertain any doubts. And he believed obviously in his talent, and that's why he was revered even by our first president when he was selected into the team. So that is how we sort of edged along, is to ask nicely and quietly in meetings behind closed doors. Yes, we know that our national team must be representative of the population of this country, but we're not going to push it. That was the policy in the initial stages. Of course, there were a lot of unhappy people, especially people who were brought up in the SACOS fold, that we were selling out. And I use the term we collectively because, even though we come from SACOS, we entered into Unity. We became involved in the administration of cricket because, we wanted to bring about change. And to do that, you've got to become involved and sit in meetings. So there were many, I can tell you, there were many fights, many behind closed doors discussions, and a lot of unhappiness about the way things were going. But we forged ahead, and you've heard the evidence now that we moved towards 1998, the adoption of a transformation charter. And again, the charter doesn't exactly spell out how our teams should be selected, who should be in the team, other than to proclaim that the team must be representative of the majority, must be representative of all people in our country. After that, we moved to a situation where the number 4 was mentioned, that at least there should be 4 players, 4 black players in the team. But again, it wasn't mandated, it wasn't compulsory, and it was an aspiration. The selectors had to pick 4 players, 4 black players, 4 players of color. So later on, you had Ntini, you had Gibbs, you had Prince, and you had Amla. And that also was the policy for a long time. When I became president in 2008, and I also testified in this regard before
Nicholson.
Judge Nicholson. One of the first meetings I had, in fact, it was a meeting after a board meeting. My first meeting was a meeting with Graham Smith and Mickey Arthur, who was the coach at the time. And I specifically asked Michael Owen Smith, who was, and I think he's still involved, he's been involved in South African cricket for a long time, media person. I asked him to sit in on the meeting because I wanted him to bear witness to it. And I explained to Graham and to Mickey where we come from, what our hopes and aspirations and even our fears are, that we come from a negotiated settlement, that they should be mindful of this when they select the team, and even at that point, it was really pleading with them and urging them to, as it was, see the light and to accommodate black players in the team. Now, when it and now what I'm talking about is really at the highest level, at the pro-tier level of things, because what can you do at that level? You also sitting with a constitution, the constitution of the country, discrimination on the basis of race, sex, gender, and so on, is unconstitutional, but it also doesn't instruct society at large, and sports in particular cricket, what you must do in order to address issues of race and gender and so on. What it does in section 9.2, I referred to that matrices and imbalances may be under the constitution, but it must be a measure. So in other words, whoever was president, and I was the president, or a board, you couldn't simply adopt a resolution and say, from now onwards, the team must be a mixed team, and there must be so many black players and so many white players. You can't do that. You couldn't do that. And you still can't do that. Because as you know, all three of you are lawyers, you know the well-known case of De Beer versus Solidarity, a constitutional court case. And I think that judgment was delivered by Justice Cameron, where the the court says that quotas is or are unconstitutional. Now, quotas instrument, and the reason why quotas is unconstitutional is because if you just say, for example, there must be 5 black players in the team, end of story, then it would be regarded as irrational. There needs to be a rational basis, and that's why you need to have a plan. So from time to time, Cricket South Africa amended its national selection policy. There's a national selection policy that was amended on several occasions to adopt this plan. And that is why, Chair, it's not just a matter of semantics, with due respect. There is a difference. There's a fundamental difference between a quota and a target. Cricket South Africa adopted the targeted transformation approach. Because if you say that there must be so many black players in the team, it means that, for example, if it's not a good example at all, but I think it highlights the irrationality of a quota, is that if, say, you and I, we find that, and we've got there's a quota of 5 players in the team, and some of the black players in the team fall ill or whatever, or for some reason they're unable to play, then if you or I are in the vicinity and we're black and we're from South Africa, we obviously qualify to be in the team because of our nationality, then it means they must ask us to put on our togs and to go and play, because the team must have so many black players in the side. Now, Cricket South Africa, in my years of administration as a former president and as the national, as the independent lead director, has always adopted the approach that it would, in fact, bring disrepute to the players, to the black players, to transformation, and to the national team if we were to simply decree that so many black players must be in the team purely on the basis of the color of their skin. The policy has always been informed by the fact that where black players are selected, they are able, they are capable, they are competent, and their inclusion is justified on the statistics and the data, either as batsmen or bowlers or all-rounders or both. And I know you had AfriForum on the other day, but
you are frozen. Can you check on your side, Advocate Arendse? We have got an image of you frozen whilst you were saying something about. Can we to let our technicians hear?
don't know. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. So let me just conclude then on that on the issue of unity, of transformation, some of the constraints and challenges that we face, especially in terms of or having regard to the Constitution and also the National Sports and Recreation Act of 1998, which simply requires the government, the National Sports and Rec, the Department of Sport and Rec, and the Minister to monitor transformation in various codes, and you've heard from Max Jordan how the eminent person group was established by the ministry to monitor transformation of the various codes, including cricket, by way of a scorecard, and then either, like cricket already has been penalized, there was a year during which we weren't allowed to organize international tours because Cricket South Africa didn't meet certain targets. So in terms of that act, the sports ministry and also SASCOC is required to play a role in transformation and development. But again, no numbers for our national teams is decreed by that legislation. So the approach, members of the panel, esteemed members, was always certainly for the first part, I would say for more than 10, 15 years, based on a sort of voluntarist approach, which is based on appeal, based on appeasement, and a soft approach to transformation. So the second phase or stage in our cricket was to adopt a targeted approach where a figure of 4 was mentioned, and part of the selection policy was also based on, and I think Hussein mentioned it earlier, that where you have 2 cricketers, one white, one black, and there's some kind of equivalence or some similarity between the two in terms of their statistics, then the black player would get preference. It was only after the outcry of the Black African Concerned Cricketers, BACC, when they sent to the then board in November 2015 a list of concerns of their unhappiness about the state or the rate of transformation in our cricket. And I think that was kick-started because of the Zondo affair in India, where he was initially selected and then was deselected. And you also heard from the selector on tour at that time, Hussein Manak, about that. The BACC memorandum was submitted to the board in November, and in around about July, August, the report I was appointed to head a task team to look into let me just find it here, the The members of the task team were myself, initially Vusi Pakoli, who was also the chairperson of the Social and Ethics Committee on the board, Tabang Mro, and also Tony Irish, who was then the CEO of SECA, because we felt that we needed the players to be represented. Of course, again, we were obliged to do that because we recognize Cricket South Africa as the sole representative of all professional cricketers. We have what is called a closed shop agreement with the South African Cricketers Association, which means that no other trade union is recognized by Cricket South Africa. And for that reason, Cricket South Africa, even now, regards SECA as the sole representative of its professional cricketers. Now, initially, it was a huge problem because the majority of SECA's members were white, simply because most of our professional cricketers were white, and they then, as soon as you become a professional, you automatically become a member of that union. The composition of SECA has changed subsequently, and I would like to think that it is largely one because of the BACC initial complaint in November 2015, and then subsequently the adoption by the CSA board in 2015, 2016, then requiring that there be 3 Black African players as a minimum in each provincial team and franchise team, and 3 also in the national team. Because the problem, in inverted commas, has always been, or rather not a problem, but it was always pointed out to those of us in administration by the national coach in particular. But you want me to select Black players, and more specifically, Black African players, but where are they? I don't see them. They're not good enough to be in this team. So we had to address that issue head on and to expand the base and to give Black African players in particular opportunities to represent the country at the national level. The board then decreed, because this voluntarist approach was clearly not working. Fortunately, we reached agreement with SECA, the trade union, on this approach, and SECA supported it. Otherwise, I think we may well have faced a court challenge because of what I mentioned earlier, the difference between quotas and targets. And since that approach was adopted, the number of Black African cricketers in particular that came through the system, through the provincial system and through the franchise system, increased exponentially, so that we were beginning to have a pool of Black African players producing the goods, challenging for positions in the national side, to the extent, like Hussein Manak, who was a selector, testified earlier that in one game against Australia, in Australia, we had as many as 8 black players, generic black players in the team, including 4 black African players. In fact, the stars in that game were Lonwabo Sotsobi and Wayne Parnell, both left arm swing pace bowlers. So, as I said, the kickstart was this letter of complaint. The task team met. It reported to Mr. Ramela, and I'm reading from I'll forward this also to Fumisa. On the 7th of December 2016, the task team report and an addendum, because there were aspects of the report which Mr. Irish, on behalf of SECA, there was a minority report from him. So we wrote to Mr. Ramela, Songo Subia, who was instrumental in leading the BACC, and Mr. Irish on the 7th of December, where we sent them the report. Now, the reason why, you will ask, obviously, why it took so long, is that in relation to the Zondo affair, we had to interview, and it's listed here, the number of people we interviewed. We had to do so in between the engagements of the Proteas. The national coach, who was at the time Russel Domingo, we never got to interview Mr. de Villiers. We interviewed Zondo and the selectors, and we compiled a report in which we found that Zondo's exclusion was unfair because it didn't conform to the CSA selection criteria and to the CSA policy. So that was in relation to, yes.
Is there a particular reason
Yes,
that the investigation regarding Zondo's exclusion, is there a reason that the investigation didn't focus on sort of like the race, if there was a racial aspect to it, or if there was racial discrimination involved?
It didn't focus on, there were obviously the allegations of racial discrimination. But from the information that was provided to the task team, we found that there were cricketing reasons, so-called cricketing reasons given for his exclusion, for his inclusion initially, and cricketing reasons for his exclusion. That is why we, as the task team, found that his exclusion was unfair without making any findings as regards allegations of race. And I guess that is why it is important for the panel to hear about this, and for the panel perhaps to take the matter forward. And I think it's perhaps it reflects on Cricket South Africa too, that we didn't go the step further to find that his exclusion was race-based. But certainly that was an allegation. We didn't. the task team didn't find it necessary to make such a finding because we did find that it was unfair. In fact, the BACC had indicated to us in a subsequent meeting that we had with them that they were not happy with these findings when we met with them subsequently to discuss it. And one of the aspects that they were unhappy about relates to what you have raised. We, in relation to the other complaints of Pangiso, we also found...
before you get there, I don't know if you heard the evidence, was it Hussein?
Yes.
Because we put the same question to him. And he
Sorry,
said... To Hussein Manak.
Yes.
Yes. And he said, look, it's a decision that he personally regrets, that it didn't go as far as to actually call it by what it appeared to be, namely that there was a racial basis for the exclusion of Zondo. He says he has thought about it. There was all manner of saying there were cricketing reasons, and he says, yeah, and he takes that position. But I suppose he says now, but on reflection, he even, made it a point to contact Zondo and discuss the matter with him because he felt that he could not live with himself given that they did not push. Yeah, he said we didn't push enough. So what would your view be? Was it... Well, Chair, we received a written report because they were also still away on tour, and Mr. Manak, as he testified, was the selector on tour. yes.
So we received a written report from him, and I must say that we weren't quite convinced by the reasons that were given. But our mandate was to establish whether or not there were justifiable reasons for his non-selection.
Yes.
And our terms of reference was our selection policy. And having regard to the policy, having regard to the reasons that were given, we interviewed, we got the reports from Mr. Manak, we got reports from the then CEO, Mr. Arun Logat. We interviewed Mr. Domingo, who was then the national coach, and having regard, and to Kaya himself, who was obviously deeply disappointed and was completely at a loss as to why he wasn't given the opportunity to play. And like us, we were dependent on what the coach and the selectors and the CEO was telling us. We had many attempts at securing the attendance of the captain, and he never appeared before us. So again, absent hearing directly from him, because We didn't feel that it would be prudent to simply infer or to draw a conclusion from his, and we couldn't even call it a failure or a refusal to appear before us. He had legitimate reasons every time when we met why he didn't appear. As you will know by now, he's a very busy cricketer. He's in demand, and if the Proteas were not on tour, he was playing IPL cricket or whatever. So we didn't see the need at that point to go beyond that his exclusion was unfair.
Yes.
But I guess it's open to you. I don't know if Kaya is going to appear before you. I don't know if De Villiers is going to appear before you, if he's implicated in Kaya's evidence. But as you would expect, esteemed members of the panel, as a lawyer, I was confined to the four corners of my brief. I was confined to the evidence and to the information that was placed before us. And on that information, we couldn't make a finding that he was excluded because of the color of his skin. Yes, we certainly had a reasonable suspicion that may well have been the case, but a clear finding would not have been justified on the evidence placed before us. As far as the, sorry, so I will make available to you the report that was placed, the task team report, and the report that was placed before the board, and the findings and the recommendation of the task team.
Yeah.
As far as the other issues raised by the BAC, the Pangiso incident, again, we found that he was taken on and didn't get an opportunity to play in the World Cup. And at that point, you know, I could be criticized for saying that I'm looking for excuses, or I'm trying to justify what the board did at the time. But quite frankly, I wouldn't say I don't care, but I need to say it as it is. And that is that or politicians do not interfere in the selection of teams. To appoint, you do your best to appoint.
Nomi, I have to say, your evidence is so critical. I want to suggest that because of these, you know, failures of internet connectivity, I want to suggest that rather than that, we should miss your testimony. And especially I have in mind also the fact that you have got a commitment right now as things are, because it's now 1701. Can we come to an arrangement for us to reschedule your hearing for August? You see, like now you are muted. I will get a technician to your chambers and say, stay with Advocate Norman Arendse.
Sorry, I can't hear you so nicely.
Yes, I was saying,
Yeah.
because of these connectivity problems, I want to suggest, bearing in mind that, you know, there was also this 5 o'clock, because we don't want to lose a word of your testimony. It's throwing light to a number of things that have already been testified about. So we want to propose a rescheduling of your hearing. We'll find a time, a mutually convenient time between us and you, for you to complete your testimony.
Yes, Chair. I would welcome being a comment
It's very important.
dated at another time that that's mutually. I do think that I can provide some important and relevant contextual evidence or a contribution in relation to a number of that has arisen from the evidence that was given subsequent to my initial scene setting.
Yes.
Evidence that I gave.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So yes, I'm quite happy that if we could perhaps adjourn my.
No, we will adjourn these proceedings on the clear understanding that we'll find a mutually convenient time during the month of August, during which you will then, testify to the end. In the meantime, the material that you had promised to send to Advocate Ngale, we will look forward to receiving it ASAP.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
We are adjourned till
Thank you.
tomorrow.